You're probably doing everything. You're trying to get sleep. You're trying to exercise right. You're trying to diet right. Maybe you're even fasting. You're reducing your calories, but you're still feeling tired, still feeling really anxious, like a lot of kind of these jittery things, and you feel like you either can't lose weight or you're even storing fat. These are kind of telltale signs of high levels of cortisol. Now, high levels of cortisol do not defy the laws of thermodynamics. They do not magically make us gain a bunch of weight, but they can certainly make it a heck of a lot harder, right? So this video is going to teach you how to regulate cortisol by the best ways that we know, right? There's literature that helps us understand that cortisol definitely can make it harder to lose weight. It can cause all kinds of these issues, especially with restlessness and whatnot. But first we have to look at what cortisol is. Cortisol is not bad, okay? Spikes of cortisol are what we need. It's our fight or flight. It's gonna elevate in the morning. It's gonna go down at night. We're gonna have a nice normal spike here and there. And we want it to spike when we're stressed. It's supposed to do that. It's not supposed to be chronically elevated. So where people go wrong is they start thinking of cortisol and like adrenal fatigue and things like that. That's a little far. The reality is we do have situations where there's chronically high cortisol. And since we have more glucocorticoid receptors within our belly, it does directly relate with visceral fat. So stress and visceral fat, stress and belly fat, that's a very real thing. A lot of the cortisol issues come down to lifestyle problems, right? They come down to stress or poor sleep. We're gonna get into the specifics a little bit more. So let's go ahead and break it down. Now, also drop a comment down below for the algorithm. It helps this video get out to the right people. YouTube just wants the engagement. They're trying to compete with all those things where people gab all the time, like Instagram and TikTok. So drop a comment down below, even if it's just for the algorithm, and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. So the common problems, first off, believe it or not, when it comes down to waking up and having coffee immediately when you're still fasted, even though there's evidence that says that that isn't the case, there's also fairly strong evidence in psychosomatic medicine that finds that having coffee like right when you wake up on an empty stomach might be contributing to higher levels of circulating cortisol and a way too high of a spike in the morning. Does that mean that no one should have coffee first thing in the morning? No, I think that's where things get a little hairy. Because if you're dealing with high circulating chronic cortisol, then yes, having caffeine first thing in the morning might not be the best thing. But if you're doing just fine, I don't think there's an issue with having caffeine first thing in the morning, right? So you gotta have to balance that out a little bit. The literature suggests both, but if you're really dealing with stress and high cortisol, it's probably not the best idea. The other one is undereating, believe it or not. So undereating is a major cause of this, right? So there was a study published in Physiology and Behavior found that, I think in this particular case, women that were undereating or traditionally skipped breakfast, not like intermittent fasting skipped breakfast, but just didn't eat breakfast, they would undereat and ultimately would have higher levels of circulating cortisol. So definitely something we want to be aware of. The other one that people don't think about is a blood sugar crash. Okay, so when you have a blood sugar spike from eating carbohydrates, you're gonna have a potential crash depending on how high the spike was. That crash is a stressor. Okay, so remember when you crash, that stresses your body. So what happens? A cortisol release. So you're getting random spikes that are not aligned with your circadian cues, right? So these random spikes dysregulate the entire hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. So cortisol is kind of cattywampus. Do this time and time and time again, add in insulin resistance, you've got a recipe for chronically high cortisol, as well as chronically high insulin, which is two things that you don't want combined. Lots of blue light in the evening and at night can definitely do this, but also overtraining based on your allostatic load. What that means is it's not always about, is your training program too much? It's more about, is your training program too much for where you are at right now? If you're dealing with relationship struggles, is it the time to be training more than you usually do to try to distract yourself from the real problems, right? So these relative overtraining aspects make a big difference. There was a study published in Fertility and Sterility found that overtraining led to a 48% increase in circulating cortisol levels. So we're talking high levels of cortisol chronically. This is terrible, right? So what are the signs of this? What are the signs that you have higher levels of circulating cortisol? One is you can't get rid of abdominal fat. This is a very real thing. There was a study that was published in Obesity Research, found that the higher the stress, the higher the cortisol, the worse the waist to hip ratio. This is just one study out of a lot. Remember, we have more glucocorticoid receptors, 4 times the amount of glucocorticoid receptors in our visceral fat than anywhere else in the body. So as far as stress and cortisol is concerned, the more stress and cortisol, and I don't care what the stress is, whether it's relationship, workout, blood sugar crash, poor sleep, it's all a stress, that's going to trigger the visceral fat to hold on to more. The next sign is going to be poor sleep, right? So you've got this poor sleep, specifically waking up between 2 and 4 a.m., right? So you're waking up at 2, waking up at 3, can't go back to sleep, might as well just get up and start the day, right? Well, there's a study that was published in Medicine Reviews that looked at just this. High circulating cortisol, once again, associated with waking up in those early morning hours, which also coincides with what's called the dawn phenomena, which if you're insulin resistant, you've probably heard of before. That is an issue where you have like blood sugar sort of dysregulation or preemptive spikes that happen early. So that aligns with these cortisol spikes too. It throws everything off. The next sign is sugar and or salt cravings. There's a study in obesity that found that high cortisol is associated with these cravings once again. Then you're also noticing your mood is probably affected. This could go with cravings, could go without cravings, but when your mood's affected, it's because you're having these undulations in blood sugar and other things. And then of course you're gonna have brain fog. But this comes with all these other things. Poor sleep, all this, all that. You're having the blood sugar crash, it's gonna make you feel foggy. So what is it that you eat? Okay, the first thing that I would recommend is 85 to 90% dark chocolate. Okay, we're looking at magnesium-rich foods, but dark chocolate has literature behind it to improve mood, not just because of the theobromine, but also because of the epicatechins. The epicatechins are flavonoids that have potential cortisol-regulating effects. This is really wild stuff. We're seeing more and more evidence that cocoa and green tea catechins, like again, epicatechin, could be really powerful here. There was a study, I can't remember where it was published, but it was looking at Japanese people and the amount of green tea they would consume. And they found that the more green tea, up to 5 cups a day, led to lower levels of stress and lower levels of anxiousness, indicating that even though there's caffeine coming in, they were less anxious. The researchers believe it has something to do with the epicatechin. The epicatechin is a really important thing here that we need to focus on. Okay, now what I would recommend is that you find different ways to get cocoa in, different ways to get epicatechin in as much as you can. I put a link down below for Thrive Market. That is a 30% off discount link for your entire grocery order. The reason I mention them is because they have a huge variety of dark chocolate, sugar-free and low sugar versions, but they also have all your other groceries that you'd shop for. So 30% off your entire grocery order through Thrive Market using that link down below. Plus it also gets you a free gift. The best thing about Thrive Market is how they source their products. You're not gonna have products that have nefarious ingredients in them. So you're not gonna have products that have weird fillers and hidden nasty things in it. So when you're looking at like the dark chocolate, you can rest assured they're looking at good products. But also, like anything else you're shopping for. Some people even have access to the Thrive Fresh and Frozen, which is really cool. So you can actually do your fresh and frozen shopping if you're one of those. But even without that, pantry staples, baked goods, all of these things without the garbage ingredients delivered right to your doorstep. So that link down below for 30% off. When we're talking magnesium, also consider just straight up magnesium supplements too. I recommend dimagnesium malate, and if you're dealing with chronically high cortisol, take it in multiple lower doses throughout the day to keep blood levels stable. So dimagnesium malate is a great company called Jigsaw Magnesium that I really recommend there. Now the interesting thing is high dose vitamin C can blunt cortisol. Okay, so a couple of foods: red bell peppers, high vitamin C without a lot of sugar. Strawberries, high vitamin C without tons of sugar. Golden kiwis, probably one of the most potent vitamin C sources. However, there is a fair bit of sugar in them. Now it's fruit, so it's got fiber, and the golden kiwis, you can eat the skin, so it slows everything down. But if you're insulin resistant, you may not want to go with like golden kiwis. You may just want to go straight up high dose vitamin C supplementation at like 2 to 3 grams. Do this throughout the course of the day. Make sure your gut can tolerate it. There is a profound effect with vitamin C and cortisol. Now, the interesting thing is some of these vitamin C rich foods that have carbs in them could be beneficial for you, believe it or not. So a lot of people, they're really quick to like get the carbs out of the equation when they're dealing with weight issues. But you gotta remember that sometimes if you're dealing with cortisol, having a little bit of carbs could actually blunt that. Insulin can blunt cortisol. If you are not insulin resistant, try adding some carbs from things like kiwis or strawberries. It might actually bring your cortisol down and it might break the cycle. It's what happened to me. Okay, I was doing super low carb and fasting all the time and I wasn't sleeping, so my cortisol levels were going up. And even though my calories were low, I was retaining water like crazy because my cortisol was high. So what I did is I actually added some carbs in, just enough to decrease my cortisol levels and help me sleep. And then I got onto the right track again. So sometimes you have to throw like a stick in the spoke, so to speak, and disrupt things a little from what you're used to doing. Glycine is another huge one. People don't think about glycine and its effect on the brain, the calming effect, but it's also got a huge effect on the HPA, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Glycine is super important. We talk about magnesium glycinate to help us sleep, but what about straight glycine throughout the day to help us? So this is going to be things like bone broth, okay, things like collagen, things like even ground beef, believe it or not, because of the actual connective tissue having glycine in ground meat. This is hugely important. In addition to that, there was a study that was published in the Molecular Nutrition and Food Research Journal. This was fascinating because it looked at omega-3s on cortisol. It found that adequate omega-3s from whether 1 to 3 grams of omega-3 supplementation, fatty fish, you name it, actually lowered cortisol. Now, this has something to do with the inflammation. Remember, inflammation is stressful. It is a stress on the body. That is why it's called inflammation, because the stress and the inflammation is an actual immune response in and of itself. So if we can control the inflammation, we turn down the stress associated with it. And omega-3s are very good at this. So 1 to 3 grams of omega-3s. Then there's a study published in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism that found that having slower digesting carbs at night reduced cortisol. Now this is not surprising because there's a serotonergic effect and an insulin effect. But again, it's like I said, you gotta throw a stick in the spokes sometimes and disrupt the train wreck that you're on. Because what you're doing isn't working, right? So if you're doing tons of restrictive stuff and it's not fixing things, Einstein even said, insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting a different result. So try changing it up. Just add some carbs at night. See what happens. It might be the one little thing that you need to kickstart good progress again. The next thing is adaptogens. Okay, things like ashwagandha, things like rhodiola, these have a profound effect. So don't negate those. I know ashwagandha can make some people feel numb, but it also might be super helpful. And again, taking something like 5-HTP, 5-hydroxytryptophan, to increase serotonin precursors and ultimately release more serotonin. Now here's how I would actually structure your day, given what I just talked about with the foods. Day structure, you'd want to start your day with some morning light. That makes sense. We all have heard that before. A little bit of red light, maybe some near infrared, some good old sun in the eyes. You don't need much. And light exercise. Remember, with cortisol reduction, we're not trying to stress ourselves. We're actually trying to do the opposite. So sunlight has a serotonergic effect. So we want serotonin to be kind of produced at the same time as we're also getting this dopamine hit from the sun. It's a nice little combination that can help us out a ton. So get up in the morning, go for a little walk in the sun, or just go outside and stretch in the sun. I want you to wait to have caffeine until you have your first meal, which is going to be a protein and fat-based meal. Okay, I'm not opposed to having caffeine right when you wake up, but in the sense of having high cortisol, if you know you have high cortisol, it might not be worth adding on top of it. So caffeine can come in with your protein and fat breakfast that is lower carbohydrate in the morning. I want your lunch to be a magnesium-rich lunch. Okay, so maybe some leafy greens, maybe some almonds, maybe some dark chocolate, or better yet, eat some good protein and take a magnesium supplement so you can kind of manipulate that a little bit. Evening is when I want you to bring in protein and carbs and reduce the fat and add bone broth or collagen in. This is where you'd want to add some collagen, get that glycine in, right? That's going to help you out in a calming effect and help regulate and bring down cortisol at the right time, right? Adding more magnesium into the mix might be good here too. Lastly, try flipping your electrolytes to evening time. If you have your electrolytes at night, it might help curb some of the blood sugar or the sugar cravings, things that you get at night that might actually wake you up. Also, keeping you hydrated throughout the night could be a beneficial thing. I'm not opposed to electrolytes during the day at all. I love that. But having electrolytes at night might help your sleep. And this would be a good time to add tryptophan as a precursor, theanine to help you sleep, and 5-HTP at about 50 to 100 milligrams. So as always, keep it locked in here on my channel. See you tomorrow.